This movie was very unfortunately just a popcorn flick in the end when it could have been so much more. Very quickly, if you are new here, I do like to cover those movies that are less talked about and get a little less coverage. Really just try and find a hidden gem, one for myself, but two, maybe add it onto your watch list. So if you are new here, please do hit subscribe for more, but let's get on with the review. Asking for It. Now, Asking for It had every opportunity to tell a really serious and a really deep story, I feel here. Whether it was a writing idea or directing, it just didn't stick that landing or really go deep enough into the subject material. I will be honest now, it is a bit of a heavy one, this one. Within this movie, the main focus here is on Joey. Early in the movie, she meets up with like an old friend. They agree to go to a party later on that night, and ultimately she is sexually assaulted within this. Personally, I feel how they handled the instance and how they depicted it was very interesting. I think one of the better choices in this movie. It didn't show necessarily the scene, but more waking up and having flashbacks from being drunk. So it wasn't necessarily explicit, but you very clearly got the message. But it's then how they move on from this moment. This movie that could have been very deep is just a shallow one in the end. For the time that passes after this, they jump to a montage of her. So it doesn't show necessarily her dealing with the situation or dealing with the scenario. It's just a shot of her face. Those videos people do where they take a photo of themselves every day for like a year and it just cuts through really quickly. It's kind of similar to that they do here for her. And the purpose of this is to introduce her to Reggie. And Reggie is part of and ultimately brings Joey into an all-femme kind of vigilante gang. They're there to take down those people that do sexually assault or take advantage of women. Look, I'm all for that premise. But the movie doesn't at any point just take a downbeat, take a moment to breathe, effectively with the girls anyway. So there is a big cast in this movie. There's a few, I think there's a group of maybe 6 girls here, and they all were quite distinct from each other, very unique, but within themselves, they don't have that much dialogue. They don't talk with each other, have any real moments. They talk more at each other, and it feels like everything they say is just to push a narrative forward. That's what I mean by there's not a downbeat. You know those scenes in movies I genuinely just think are great where it's a heavy subject material and it just allows the character to breathe for a moment, deal with it and talk it through. They don't really do that here until maybe the third act, and it comes back up and it flares up very quickly and out of nowhere. We've got Ezra Miller in here. The Flash is in this, playing, let's be honest, one of the most despicable guys that you can get. He's like an alright men's first group leader. He's one of the 2 villains in this movie, and that's another thing that brings this down a peg. The movie seems a little bit confused at who the villain is as we get closer to catching them, getting them and wrapping up the story. But the videos he plays, he's one of these guys that began online as like a pick-up artist for women, but he's just sleazy. And that moved very quickly into how men should dominate women and how men are the superior race and how we're better at everything, and so got his followers. And the sad thing is, people like that exist out there in the world. 1, that believe it, but 2, these people that get power and get an audience from saying the most ridiculous shit out there. But the videos themselves are very old, it feels. Like the editing they use in them and the sound effects. That's not what videos are like now. It's not what viral videos are like these days. So I don't know who designed the videos in this movie to be viral, because it's a modern movie. But he does play the part very well. You just fucking despise him every time he's on screen because he's just sleazy and he's just scum. So really the plot here is these girls within this gang, they've got their own community that's there. And it is really nice. They show off a few things in the community. They've got their own club and safe spaces, etc. But they set off to take down Ezra Miller in this movie. Take down his group and really just make a scene and make a message that the girls are not going to stand for this. So Joey, our lead, she gets initiated into the gang a little bit here. Whilst they're out one night, they see somebody who is assaulting his partner, and the girls step in. They do a good job at kind of showing the guy who's boss and really just help this girl out. And because Joey didn't really get put off by this, she's allowed into the gang and can come with them. And as soon as she makes friends with Reggie and is introduced to the gang and goes through this kind of impromptu initiation, as it were, it's like the movie forgets its own setup and forgets what's happened with Joey. There's not much talk about it. It doesn't seem to be a thought in her mind for most scenes. She's just getting on with it and going with these girls. Now I get that there's a strength of character element, but it's a traumatic thing and the movie just seems to forget that, or doesn't know how to write for it or cater for that. I really like Reggie as like the main girl in the group. I think she is very good, very charismatic as well, and she's just fun and badass. And her and Joey do bounce off each other very well. One thing thing I was afraid of as the movie progressed, and thankfully it didn't do, is portray all guys as evil. There's a few guys, police sheriff and his partner, they're complicated to say the least, but they're not necessarily bad guys or villains. There is somebody they come across as well who was trained by the all-femme group, and he's now on his own and is now really starting his own group with these boys, but teaching the same morals and making sure that they're upstanding citizens and making sure they're doing right by women. So it is good that they've got that balance at least, because it could have very easily become an all guys are villains sort of movie. I'm getting serious Sarah Connor vibes though off of one of the women here. Sal in this movie, 100% Sarah Connor, and I'm not against that by any means. But whilst they're on their way to get Ezra Miller's character in this movie, they find out that there's a frat house. Now it was going through court systems and it's been let off essentially, which these girls are not having. This frat house was getting all sorts of allegations that you could imagine given the premise of the movie. So they go and take care of the frat boys, then continue on their adventure, and I can't help but feel like it is just an utter side quest in this movie, because it doesn't play into the movie later on. It's just something that they literally have to change their route, go and do, and then come back for, and it is the movie equivalent of a side quest. It was a very entertaining scene, and it allowed the characters to really shine and show off a couple of new angles, so it was fun, it was entertaining to watch it when it was happening. But at the same time, why? You could cut that out of the movie and it wouldn't have made any difference whatsoever, genuinely. And coming back to these villains here just before wrapping up, of course, as I said, they're a way to get Ezra Miller's character, this men's first group. But there's also an old sheriff that seems to allow him to act the way he's acting and do certain things. He's also a villain. This is why the movie gets quite confused, because the whole time we're going after one villain, then a second one comes in, and now we're going after both of them. It just gets a little bit messy towards the end. The movie does wrap up quite neatly with Joey coming back to the man at the start of the movie. It was a very tense scene. I really did like the dialogue that they chose here, because it wasn't too over the top. You understood where she was coming from completely, of course, and it was in fitting with her character, especially what's happened throughout this movie. So I did enjoy that, but you came away thinking that that was almost the only time she really dealt with it, and that was her literally dealing with him. There wasn't an emotional beat where she dealt with her own trauma at any point. And all girls in this movie, I will say, have been through their own stuff. It did tell you through snippets here or there in the movie what each of the girls' kind of past is. Of course, most of them more than likely have dealt with it to the most part. It's not raw is what I mean, you know, it's happened. They're still dealing with it on a daily basis, but it's not new. So I can appreciate why they might not be having their down moments, but I'd at least expect it from Joey here. So that's what I mean by the movie doesn't necessarily go deep when it really had the opportunity and potential to do so. It becomes a more popcorn revenge flick than anything else. So where would I be putting this? I'd say if you've got the time to watch it, you could go wrong. There's a lot worse out there, but I wouldn't expect anything too heavy from this movie. It is a heavy subject material, but it doesn't go into it too deeply. You're here more to follow these women in this gang getting revenge without feeling that it's all women first and women only sort of attitude. So credit to them for that and at least striking that balance. Look, that was just some of my thoughts here on asking for it. Have you seen it? If you have, let me know down below if we agree or disagree. And if you are new, please do hit subscribe, that would be amazing. But thank you so much for watching.